What drives me to play MapleStory for over 15,000 hours and stream most of it? Why would I choose to play every class to 250 instead of just focusing on one? And why on earth, in a game full of shortcuts, would I choose to reject spawn enhancers entirely? Let's piece together this 5 years long journey and try to understand the unique mindset that fueled it. My Maple grind is a rhythm, a meditative flow that thrives in simplicity. Spawn enhancers like Frenzy Totem would simply disrupt this inner peace. It's not about efficiency, it's about the joy of the process. The steady beat of the spawn waves that feels almost therapeutic. At 10.7k Legion, I've funded all 49 classes to level 250 or higher. That's 7 more than the 42 required for Legion. For me, the game isn't about mastering one class. It's about experiencing everything that MapleStory has to offer, one class at a time. My account remains devoid of even the lowly status of MVP bronze, a badge of honor to my free-to-play journey. I'm not here to pay for progress, I'm here to earn it. Every item and achievement is a product of time and effort. There's no rush or no pressure, just the satisfaction of playing the game on my own terms. Interactive is the server I call home. While others might chase the easier masso and potentials of heroic, I value the convenience of trading far more. If it weren't for it, I'd be stuck with early game gear forever. Bossing isn't a chore I force myself into, it's something I do for fun at my own pace. Hard bosses, not my priority. I'd rather grind, farm, and trade my way to progress, free of the weekly obligations that come with endgame content. Petite Luna Pets, a highly sought after luxury that allows players to loot items from a distance. Most people struggle to even save up enough to get one for their main character. What if I had one for each class branch? I thought to myself. And so began the journey to purchase vac pets for every class branch whenever the prices leaned my way. 8 of my 11 class branches are currently blessed by Petite Luna Pets, covering all classes minus 4. Farming is my main source of income. Sure, there's times when boss mills take the spotlight, but even then, farming easily outpaces my boss mill masses. Right now, I'm in quite the unique phase, maxing out arcane symbols on every class by doing dailies on all of them. A temporary shift, but soon enough, I'll be back to the good old grind. There have even been times where boss crystals were not even on the menu, when the 250 grind took precedence and everything else fell by the wayside. More often than not, efficiency takes a backseat to enjoyment. You won't find me in boss parties or guild events. I'm a solo player through and through, treating MapleStory like a single player game rather than an MMO. Playing at my own pace, free from the expectations of others, is what keeps me going. Efficiency, carefully laid out plans, not my style. I'm the kind of player who wings it, embracing the spontaneous decisions. Whether it's skipping daily chores like Monster Park, MPE, High Mountain, or diving headfirst into raw dog grinding, I do what feels right in the moment. For me, MapleStory isn't a spreadsheet, it's a playground. So let's go back to where it all began and piece the journey together. In July of 2019, during the Adventure Island event and the release of Pathfinder, I set out on a journey. Originally, the plan was to play Reboot and use Luna to free-to-play Maple points for convenience. But as fate would have it, Luna became the main stage. The allure of the regular server was too strong, and Reboot remained untouched. The harsh monster HP and trading restrictions of Reboot did not spark joy. The journey began with a Dark Knight, named Angry Black, a nod to Kobe, the legendary KMS Dark Knight whose gameplay inspired many. A bit of an edgy username, sure, but in good faith. For a while, the Dark Knight was the main focus, a labor of love and dedication. In those early days, a self-imposed challenge took shape, a half Ironman approach. The rule was simple: no buy-in gear until the boss was defeated solo. Non-KMS gear would also be off the table, meaning I wouldn't use Golux gear until much later. It was a test of patience and skill, a way to prove that progress could be earned, not bought. These limitations would later be abandoned, but for the time being, they made for a very interesting early struggle. Back then, dailies were a marathon, not a sprint. Completing them was a ritual that would take you at least an hour every day. A far cry from the quality of life improvements that we enjoy today. Teleporting to bosses, forget it. You had to queue up, hope someone joined, and pray that you could leave the party quick enough so they didn't kidnap you into their own boss fight. Quick traveling revolved around finding creative ways to get to Six Path Crossway. The Maple guide was clunky, requiring endless scrolling to teleport to Gold Beach, followed by a trip to Six Path Crossway to reach your destination. A not so fortunate scroll wheel fell to the relentless use of this mechanic. Few were the alternatives, all equally clunky. Arcane dailies were a slog. Minigames were daily with no skippable runs. Mob counts were higher, and symbol rewards were stingier. Maxing out as Farah and Morris was a one-year journey, a badge of honor to your consistency. With a much stricter time requirement and the possibility of dying out with just a couple mistakes, Spirit Savior was truly a keyboard smasher. The symbol reward was based on your score. Fail a run, and you might just have to give up on your symbols for the day. Unless, of course, you could clutch a 15k points run to compensate. With no hyperstats or link presets, you had to reassign everything every single time you switched between bossing and grinding. Let's not forget about the auto-buff struggles. With only one auto-buff per path and no support for decent skills, bossing was a chore. Buff freezers were a necessity to preserve buffs after death, but their availability was slashed and they were later given expiration dates. Combined with daily and practice mode entry limits, practicing a boss became an exercise in frustration. Yet, through it all, there was a sense of accomplishment. Every reset brought a new round of dailies, a chance to upgrade arcane symbols, an inch closer to greatness. To this day, symbols remain a cornerstone of passive progression, a reminder of those early struggles. The economy in 2019 was an absolute mess. Inflation ran rampant, making massive farming and boss crystals nearly worthless. For early game players, the only straightforward sources of income were Commercy and Golux, especially since earlier difficulties still dropped the coins and Helix was a much easier boss fight. Even then, the auction house was a nightmare. Prices were so inflated that anything beyond a clean arcane gear would balloon up past the 30 bill Maso cap and not be listed on the auction house. It was a dark time for regular servers, where progression felt out of reach for many. And yet, despite the chaos, I found my own way. Taking advantage of the relatively low Starforce price, the only silver lining in the hyperinflation, I Starforced my gear a lot earlier than you would today, even pushing Empress gear to 15 stars, and later CRA gear to a mix of 17 and 20. It was a testament to adaptability, making the most of a broken system. I spent countless hours grinding in Torrent Zone, Chuchu's iconic training spot. The music played on a loop at max volume, a soundtrack to the endless mobbing. Even without one-shotting, the grind was meditative. In the early days, progress was a mix of determination and sheer stubbornness. Too weak to grind in Arcana or Morris, I found myself training in Revelation Place 1 in Lachlan, hitting level 235 in a way that can only be described as hilariously scuffed. Chicken Festival 3 would have been a much better option, but that's the charm of the early grind. It wasn't about efficiency, it was about making the most of what you had. Level 235 was a major milestone at the time. Obtaining your Asphera symbol meant that you could start your 1-year countdown to max arcane symbols. Those early grinds would often be accompanied by 0 Divides, YouTube series, playing MapleStory properly, as well as the Streamer's Cardor, two very valuable resources to get a feel for the basics. August 28th, 2019, a major milestone. My first solo clear of Chaos Von. At level 228 and around 9.4k stat, it was a grueling 17 minutes fight, a near minimum damage clear that showcased more perseverance than optimization. Looking back at the recording, the stats were an absolute mess. 59% ignore defense meant a huge chunk of the damage was missing. Hyperstats were equally scuffed, with 0 points invested into IED or boss damage. And yet, despite the inefficiency, I was very proud of this victory. It was a reminder that sometimes raw determination outweighs perfect preparation. It's worth noting that Dark Knight was in a much rougher state back then. No up jump, much slower movement during Cyclone, and a clunky final pact with a 9 minutes cooldown. Sacrifice, now known as Dark Resonance, had to be pressed manually, and was a required buff to use your bossing skill. If that wasn't enough, buff duration was required for perfect uptime. Urda Nova being a much worse bind also meant that the boss could not be bound every burst. To make things worse, bursting took a lot longer, with Cyclone not being as compressed as it is now. All of these things compounded, making the class far less forgiving than it is today. 2 days later, on August 30th, Chaos Queen fell. This time, my ID was somehow even lower. But I had a trick up my sleeve, a Rune of Destruction. Back then, you could carry runes into boss fights, a small but significant advantage. October 1st marked my first solo clear of Chaos Vellum. With a meager 63% IED and just over 2 minutes left on the clock, it was a nail-biter. The fight was tougher back then. No up jump on my class meant avoiding rocks was a challenge. It's almost laughable to think about how much easier the fight could have been with better IED, but that's the beauty of hindsight. By December 27th, I added Chaos Papulatus to the list of solo clears. This time, the stats were slightly better, 78% IED and 20k stat, but the hyperstats were still a mess, with 0 points into IED. With one-shot clocks, this boss fight was a far cry from how forgiving it is in the present day. At this point, the grind had moved to Raiden Temple 3, a map that, in retrospect, was far from ideal. The rotation was subpar, and without Celos or Urda Fountain, the experience was a slog. Looking back, staying in Moras might have been the better choice. But at the time, it was just another step in the journey. And just like that, 2019 was over. A year marked by intense perseverance despite my lack of experience. I checked off my first normal Damien clear on January 16th, with 20 seconds left on the timer. With around 20k stats, you'd think it would be more than enough for a comfortable clear. But the lack of movement and much worse boss utility and lack of experience hindered my damage output on a boss fight as volatile as Damien. 10 days passed, and normal Lotus went down with a comfortable 3 minutes to spare. Here, I showcase just how laughable my gear was. Despite having such high star force with multiple 17-star items and even a couple 20 stars, my 10 attack bonus potentials were nowhere to be found, possibly because of the steep prices of occult cubes. I was already a proud owner of 3 dark totems for a sizable 15 attack and 36 stat boost for each of the 3 totems. A missed but never forgotten event that seems unlikely to return. My 20 stars Fafnir weapon was later transfer hammered to become a 19 stars Abzu. A hilariously bad decision, driven by not having the guts to push that last star on the Fafnir. February brought the Wondroid event, equipping my Dark Knight with a fancy mechanical heart and a whole lot of attack from the scrolling. Strangely enough, I was only able to find footage of my Wondroid runs on Reboot? I don't think anything ever came of that. More old footage shows me training Legion mules in Partem ruins around this time. A fond memory of a questline that is vastly forgotten these days. At this time, I was also venturing into Moonbridge, Void Current 4 being my map of choice. Not the best the area has to offer in terms of kill rates, but sufficient nonetheless. The same month, my journey branched off into KMS, as neighbor accounts made the biggest and most popular version of the game more accessible than ever. A temporary but cherished detour, often accompanied by the streamer Codenox, who was also at the time diving into the server. Experiencing the wonders of a functioning economy and a booming player base was truly an eye-opening experience, a far cry from the struggles of GMS regular servers. My past experience, combined with the much more straightforward and convenient progression of KMS, made the early milestones a breeze. Watching the amount of people passing by at the Horntail entrance was truly a sight to behold. I basked in the glory of the Korean server all the way until June, making it all the way to 247 and experiencing the newest content 6 months ahead of GMS. I have extremely fond memories of events like Hotel Maple, events that offered unprecedented benefits at the time. It was during this event that, in an unbelievable stroke of luck, using free cubes, I rolled this. A 3-line double prime, a Dell secondary with 75% boss and 9 attack, which I would later sell for 14 bill. In a cruel twist of fate, neighbor accounts were terminated in June, and the plans to make the Korean server the place I called home vanished as quickly as they had started to form. All the masso I had, around 20 bill, was donated to Kobe, who split it with his bossing party. Winding down from this high, I took a 6 months hiatus to pursue other hobbies, only to return stronger in 2021. Seeking a fresh experience, I took yet another detour to challenge the Reboot server, playing on the NA server as a Blaze Wizard. As a seasoned weeb and man of culture, I felt the need to name my character after the voluptuous wizard from Zero no Tsukaima, Kirosh the Ardent. This would be a relatively short journey, ending at 17 stars Absolab's gear, with the usual self-imposed limitations such as avoiding non-KMS gear and progressing as a solo player. An exploratory chapter, one that reinforced my preference for the trading server. February 2021 marked the beginning of my streaming journey. A major leap for me, given that I was too shy to even be in an English-speaking voice chat at the time. A plunge of faith, one that would ultimately lead to where we are today. My master of the English language has seen much progression since these days. Looking back at these old streams, I can barely even recognize my own voice despite using the same audio equipment. Like, who is this guy? It's two-line internet. Okay, it seems that rolling two-line is really hard with Meso. My knowledge of photography and videography was also much more limited at the time, leaving my facecam neglected until much later. This was a time of major controversy brewing in the MapleStory community. The Korean overlords were caught red-handed, coding mistakes into their RNG. Inability, flames, none of the probabilities were what they claimed they were. To the dismay of Maplers all around the world, this incident saw the biggest compensation yet, most notably a 90 days Petit Luna pet, 1,000 arcane symbols, 25 hours of 3x coupons, and a 1-to-1 refund on the last 2 years of Flames and Honor. As disheartening as this incident might be, it brought much needed transparency from Nexon, leading to probability rates being released for cubes, innerability, flames, and many other things, as well as public access to probability data that any player could verify. These early streams would also occasionally see me playing Osu. Though my ability in this game was nothing to write home about, I am to this day a big fan of rhythm games. The end of March 2021 saw the return of Mechanical Hearts. This time, I decided to go all out and conquer every single jump quest, taking pride in mastering the reverse steam route and acquiring Skyroid on my reboot character. A badge of honor and a permanent memory of an event that would never return to this very day. A troubled but enjoyable event that needed just a little bit more love from the developers. These early streams is where the philosophy of a Legion main started to take shape, but the realization would not come until much later. I would find myself funding my other characters to solo Chaos Ritibus and leveling all of them to 220. Feeling good about this explorative endeavor, I just kept going. And in June, I was already clearing CRE on 10 different classes. This would push my Legion level past 7.5k. June would also see some progress with my stream, obtaining my affiliate status and drawing my first 2 emotes in a moment of inspiration. My curiosity would eventually lead me to explore the Tower of Oz, and over the course of a few weeks, I would learn the ins and outs of this content, feeling good about my progression. This would prove to be an extremely valuable endeavor, as the Go Island event would later be revealed, boosting box rewards from the tower, and making this an extremely lucrative endeavor. My Oz runs would go into overdrive, as I tried to cap my daily runs as much as possible, interleaving massa grinding with Oz runs, and even doing some runs off-stream. At this point, the Maso income from running CRE on so many characters had become quite sizable. It really seemed like the sky was the limit, with no boss crystal limit at the time. Between June and September 2021, I found myself pushing my Dark Knight to 260, hitting this milestone on September 7th. Initially interleaving some more 220s, over time, I became entranced by the farming, as I finished my Massa gear and transitioned into Lumina 2.5, a safe haven for players with no Petit Luna pets. Thanks to Yiratas, back then going by Protect, I finally discovered the forbidden power of the Cash 2x drop coupon, a multiplicative drop buff which would effectively double your Massa farming rates. Bypassing the Massa bag drop limit, this chatter would go on to become a great friend and a very entertaining VTuber. September 2021 brings a grim announcement. To comply with gambling regulations, Nexon completely restricts Dutch players from trading or using the Massa market. A ridiculous proposition if you consider that it's still possible to gamble all your money away on cubes and the many other gacha mechanics accessible through the cash shop. A rushed implementation that would never be lifted nor alleviated to this very day, despite other next-gen games such as Mabinogi not suffering the same fate. 2.5 would be my home for countless hours, all the way to level 266, building up enough of a fortune to acquire my very first Petite Luna pet, as well as upgrading my belt to a 15-star Starrent, and funding my arcane armors, a huge boost to my mobbing damage that eventually allowed me to move into Cernium. A few 220s were completed in this transition period, waiting for a Petite Luna pet to show up in the auction house. By the end of the year, the number of 220s would go up to 21, shaping up to be an army worthy of its name, and pushing my legion to the then sizable milestone of 8k, long before it was expanded from 40 to 42 characters. December would also see me return to the beloved and familiar Korean server, having obtained access to a shared account through some connections. Knowing the volatility of such an arrangement, I set my sights low, only aiming to keep up with events and check out new content. And so, another year was over. 2021 was an explorative year, a year that saw a huge shift in the pace of my gameplay, one that would see me set my sights higher than ever before. Finally having the means to grind in Cernium, this really sent my grind into overdrive, and so the majority of the Maple on-air event was spent pushing for level 270, finally achieving this goal on January 21st as I enjoyed the new scenery. This month would see some controversy. With the complete removal of any spawn enhancement effects from Kishin, Reboot was left with only wild totems as an option. Starforce prices would be lowered by 20%, bringing them closer to KMS, but still significantly higher. At this point, my mastery of the Tower of Oz had reached its peak, and I had a few good tries at the dreaded floor 48, getting extremely close but ultimately just short of a clear. Continuing to challenge the tower upstream, my stash of boxes was becoming quite sizable. February 10th was the climax of my tower antics, the grand opening of the 162 boxes and 4 shiny boxes that I had been hoarding for so long. The results? Quite lucrative. Oh, pose champ? What? We got a roar 4? Actually got a roar 4? We haven't even opened the rank 1s yet. Oh, Pog, roar 3? Actually insane. What? Look at this. 4 roar 3s and 1 roar 4. 4 rings of restraint 3s. 1 ring of restraint 4. And 2 weapon jump 4s. A worthy haul for the 200 plus hours I spent in the tower. By March, I had amassed 30 classes to 220. This month would go on to be the big climax of the year. The release of Yeti and Pinkman Word saw me compete for the number 1 spot in the Punch King, walking away with 300k Maple points as the number 1 Yeti in the Word. Those Yeti series clears would not have been possible without all the friends I met along the way. So a huge thank you to everyone who participated, and a special thanks to Alkias Knight for being such a great coach and mentor. He's currently the highest level in MapleSea, streaming his own journey to 300. The prize would go on to be liquidated into about 30 billion masses through the Massa market, which would go on to fund some of my gear upgrades. To this very day, my Yeti Punch King score remains undefeated, as the Punch King challenge was never brought back into the event. April saw the arrival of the anniversary event, and with it came the allure of coin capping on as many characters as possible for event rings, precious prep work for the future massive farming endeavors, and a good damage boost for my boss mules. ultimately settling on 10 characters I diligently coin capped for hours every day throughout the event. April 20th, 2022. My proudest bossing achievement to this very day. My very first hard Lotus clear. A minimum damage run that took countless attempts and a bit of luck. Not having the quality of life that the Destiny update would later bring made this fight a lot harder, forcing me to do half of my bursts without binding. Winding down from all the action, I interleaved massive farming on my Dark Knight with grinding more 220s, cruising all the way to June with Wild Hunter and Xenon, as well as hitting level 273 on the Dark Knight. May was a particularly slow month because of all the coin capping as well as playing Super Mario Odyssey on the side. June saw the release of the Destiny update and with it the Explorer Redux. It's hard to overstate just how big of a quality of life upgrade this patch was. Urda Nova, with its cooldown being pushed down to 2 minutes at max level, became the de facto bind for bossing. Its new logic prevented mistakes, preventing you from using it when no target is in range, as well as having a multi-target hitbox that made it much easier to ensure the boss was bound, even in the midst of chaos. Gone were the days of getting knocked back, as every class got 100% stance passives, removing the need for upkeep on the Mihail link. The Legion grid would see the addition of normal mob damage, replacing the now useless knockback resistance, a much appreciated change with how tanky the grandest mobs can be. On top of huge quality of life, many classes saw huge damage buffs to their kit, dethroning the dominance of Hoyoung, Arc, and Adele. Arcane symbol prices would see a huge reduction, making this cornerstone of passive progression more accessible than ever before. With my newfound powers, my hard Lotus clears saw an astounding 30% speed up. Burning Woods, a seasonal server intended to be the training wheels of the new player. A fresh start with no link skills or legion, but with a sizable damage and EXP passive. I became intrigued by the idea of seasonal, short-term progression in this server, with all the improvisation that comes with it. A good way to test and refresh my game knowledge and adaptability. And so I set out to take on Burning Wood as a Terra Burning Bowmaster, quickly building up to 11k stat in a normal Lotus solo by day 13. This was a very enjoyable detour, one that would see me discover a small community of Burning Wood seasonal players. And so, progressing in Burning Wood became somewhat of a tradition that would continue for many more updates. My newfound passion for Burning Wood sent me on a 1-month grind on KMS, where Maplers were already enjoying the Ignition updates and the Cygnus remaster. Setting my sights higher, I progressed at Down Warrior all the way to 17 stars Absolab's gear, farming and starforcing until the very last minutes of Shining Starforce. In an unfortunate turn of events, my KMS account was hit with a protected mode lock. Unable to get in contact with the owner, my Burning Wood progression vanished. A stark reminder of the volatility of my KMS account. Devastated, but still glad the journey happened, I went back to GMS. In July, GMS had its first Shining Starforce event. In my usual style of not having a concrete plan, I decided to try my luck with Starforcing, ending up with below average luck and having to stop with a mix of 19 and 20 stars. A suboptimal decision, sure, but nevertheless a very important milestone that gave me a much needed and sizable damage boost for the upcoming higher level areas. August would be a major turning point for my journey. The Shadower I had been slowly funding with events was ready to go. With 17 star gear, full Maso accessories, max nodes, and some extra attack from premium accessory scrolls, this was an unprecedented level of funding, making this my second strongest character. The plan was simple: push for level 250, a change of pace from rapidly dishing out more 220s. So after hitting level 275 on my Dark Knight on the 3rd, I fully committed to the Shadower for over a month. The grind was meaningful, scratching that same itch that the Limina grind did before. I really enjoyed taking the time to optimize farming rotations and sharing them. I felt good about the billions of Maso piling up in my inventory as I cruised my way to 250, even avoiding EXP coupons in favor of more Maso. It was at this point that I had the vision. Maso farming all the way to 250, one class at a time. A sustainable cycle where I get to really take in the views and familiarize myself with each class. I was hooked. This was the moment I began my journey to grind every class to 250. A very long-term one, with every character clocking in at over 200 hours. The end of August saw the arrival of the Legion expansion. With 2 more characters counting towards Legion, my level was pushed all the way up to 9.1k. The month of October was spent winding down from my Shadower grind, pushing 277 on my Dark Knight. November saw a new controversy brew in the GMS community. It was announced that Wild Totems would be discontinued, leaving reboot players without any spawn enhancers. Stat Force prices were to be lowered by a further 20%, finally aligning with KMS. This was the perfect chance for me to share my base spawn farming knowledge, a training guide video that would go on to become my most popular yet, currently sitting at around 50,000 views. Despite the success of this video, I quickly got burnt out of making content, and my YouTube channel would not see much activity until this very documentary. This month also brought the Ignition update, during which I continued the tradition of Burning Word progression, defeating normal Lotus on day 8 as a Mihail. This was also the update that brought Erde Fountain, truly a game changer that would make perfect farming rates much more accessible than ever before. Wrapping up my Burning Word escapades, I moved on to the next 250 in December with Nightlord. Rocking 17-star arcanes and a really lucky 30% attack emblem that I rolled off Meister Cubes, this character was even stronger than my Shadower. It was a comfortable grind with plenty of damage to take advantage of Assassin Mark. And so, 2022 was over. A year marked by huge achievements and one that would define my long-term goals that would carry on to the present day. This was the year where I truly found my footing. At this point, I had gotten my 250s down to a science. I would run arcane dailies on 2 characters. This would save up enough symbols for a head start at level 10 by the time I started the next character. And the Maso I was getting farming to 250 was more than enough to gear up the next one. A self-sustaining cycle of joy with hardly any downtime. In January, Bowmaster would go on to become my 5th 250. This character would have a bit of a head start, starting at 237 from my previous Burning Word adventures. The month of February was spent grinding to 280 in the newly released 275 area, Odium. Marksman would be nominated as the next 250, starting the grind at the end of February and reaching the goal the next month. Cannon Master would follow as my 7th 250, grinding throughout April and concluding at the beginning of May. The grind would continue throughout the 18th anniversary event, with Fire Poison as my 8th 250, with a lot of coin capping on the side. June would be a huge month in Maple history, with KMS unveiling the New Age update. This would go on to become one of the biggest updates in years, with the release of 6 job, 3 new areas going up to level 285, a halved EXP curve to 260, and a hugely improved Hyperburn that would push players all the way to 260. And so, the rest of the world begins counting down the days to the winter patch. There was also a lot of talk about KMS reboot mob HP and EXP, which would be changed to match regular servers. This would cause mixed reactions and fear of missing out, with players rushing to level 285 in GMS Reboot. I fondly remember counting down the days to the KMS showcase. Starting on May 22nd, all the way up to June 10th, new artwork and music would be unveiled every day, sparking much speculation on its meaning. These moments of excitement would often be shared with the streamer 22 Cheese, who would often be online at the time of these reveals. Having finally regained access to my KMS account, I would set out to re-experience Reboot post New Age, a journey that I would take on as a Shadower, which I would continue playing casually on the side for the next 1+ year. This Shadower would eventually reach level 279 and 50 million combat power. The experience would be much better, a far cry from my first Reboot escapade, and yet it solidified my commitment to the trading server, as the bossing-focused approach of Reboot would leave me stuck with early game gear, a good fit for a side server to keep up with events, but with no future as a main server. Also in June, the Savior update would reach GMS, during which I used the Hyperburn on my Ice Lightning, making it my 9th 250. But I wasn't done yet. The EXP title from the Hyperburn would push me to grind it out all the way to 260 to take advantage of it. This same month, Mist would host an interview with me. This video would bring many new friends to the stream, which I'm very thankful for. Over the years, the love from other creators has been overwhelming, and I can't thank you all enough. Your presence and support means a lot. With the Hyperburn going to a Luna character, this Burning Word would be the most challenging yet. Despite starting as a measly Mega Burn with Frozen Gear, I yet again managed to build up to normal Lotus and Damien solo. Shadower was a strategic pick. The strong mobbing damage and my familiarity with the class would give me an edge against the harsh conditions. A duplicate character that would not contribute to my Legion, but one that would bring many hours of fun, ending at level 241 after continuing to do dailies and bosses for the rest of Burning Word. As Savior brought the release of Kali, she would be the obvious next choice, becoming my 10th class to 250 in August. Arc would be my 250 for September, followed by Pathfinder and Hero, fast forwarding to the beginning of November. Then Warrior would hit 250 off of Potions, putting me at 14 250s. At this point, the New Age update was inching closer and closer. Everyone was very excited for it. These days of excitement would be accompanied by my Kinesis grind, stopping just short of 250 when the update finally dropped. As fate would have it, GMS had a major screw-up leading up to the New Age update. This would be the biggest outrage the community has seen in a long time. The task server that the BIM Brigade members had access to had a daily cap on Soul Erda energy, which would severely limit 6-job progression as well as untradeable fragments. Frenzy Totem was also not working in the new instance map system, and the complete lack of communication from Nexon left players confused and fueled speculation. Fortunately, the Soul Erda cap did not make it into the game after a massive outrage. Frenzy Totem did end up working in instance maps, although only for the caster. The untradeable fragments unfortunately did make it into the game, and would remain untradeable for many more months. All of this would be a huge disappointment for me and many other regular server players, but as always, there is a silver lining to be found. And for me, that was the fact that I was never grinding on Frenzy Totem to begin with, meaning that farming on my Dark Knight was exceptionally profitable due to symbol coupons being high in demand and low on supply due to the situation with instance maps and Frenzy. As per tradition, I challenged Burning Word, this time as a Naran, finding the class surprisingly fun and approachable. This would be my 15th 250. Feeling good about my Burning Word progression, I worked on my mechanic for a few days, waiting for 6-job release. The plan was to push Dark Knight to 285 after the release of 6th Job, a huge undertaking that would take me over 500 hours. With the 10-minute run cooldown perk lasting throughout the whole event, and more EXP coupons than ever, New Age was by far the best time to be grinding for EXP. Exploring these new landscapes was a breath of fresh air, and I enjoyed putting together new farming rotations. Having reached the then highest level area Karshan on my Dark Knight, I went right back to pushing 250s, and oh boy, it was going so much faster. With the event perks and the halved EXP curve, what used to take 3 weeks would now take just over 1. January would bring a very controversial announcement over on KMS. A Maso cap would be implemented, limiting players to 4 to 5 hours of Maso farming per day, as well as beginning the process of replacing all cubes with a new magic wand system that simply consumes Maso. Worst of all, KMS Reboot was to have the same boss crystal prices and Maso farming rates as regular servers, normalizing it and slashing progression speed by an order of magnitude. Much speculation and panic would ensue in the following months, with the community divided on whether these changes would make it to GMS or not. As January turned into February, I continued to breeze through my 250s with Paladin and Dual Blade. As I was pushing Buccaneer, I got a very generous gift from Nerf, the legendary Buccaneer and world's best Punch King of GMS. She lent me a 22-star Knuckle, which helped me a lot with Lord of the Dip damage. I continued blasting 250s through February, with Demon Avenger and Demon Slayer. On the 12th of March, my Legion level would go into the 5 digits as I hit 10k Legion. This month would be dedicated to pushing Blaster, Corsair, and Bishop, ending the month closing in on 24 250s. Evan, Luminous, and Mercedes would be the next classes throughout the month of April, as well as finishing off the mechanic of potions, working on the 28th 250 by the end of the month. Meanwhile, the Maple community would explode in excitement as Nero completes his almost 3 years long grind to level 300. In an unexpected turn of events, he chooses to stop just short of the level, venting his frustrations with the game to thousands of viewers and ending the stream. A noble protest, one that would lead to change down the road. Another highlight of this month would be the debut of Inkwell, the new face of GMS. In the first note, players would be reassured that no massive changes would make it to our server, and any controversial changes would be adapted to our player base and our culture. Shade, Wild Hunter, and Battle Mage would occupy the month of May, which would go on to be a very eventful one. Nero decided to finish off his level, becoming the very first level 300 in the world, with the goal of continuing to advocate and push for a better game. A few days later, a new Inkwell note would respond to almost every point in Nero's rant. Frenzy Totem availability would be addressed, fragments and nodestones would become tradable, Grandest Familiars would be introduced, and a word merge would be considered in the first half of 2025. The Word Points shop would also see a huge improvement, with new pets and unlimited waters of life. June would be dedicated to Adele and Ilium, as well as the arrival of the Go West update, the GMS version of the KMS Dreamer update. My Burning Wood character and 33rd 250 this time around would be Lyn, the new class replacing Beast Tamer in this update. Xenon, Phantom, and Wind Archer would occupy the month of July, ending the month on my way to my 37th 250. August would be dedicated to Angelic Buster, Kadana, Thunderbreaker, and Hayato, closing in on my 41st 250. This would be the month I hit 10.5k Legion, a major milestone that really put me in the upper echelon of Legion levels. A few days later, GMS would receive the updated raid power formula, which would be a massive 168 mil raid power gain, putting me at almost 1.1 bill. The way I was funding my characters was perfect for this update, as most of them were rocking 10-star 5-set arcane and were low on Star Force but high on combat power. September would be dedicated to Kana and Kain. On my way to my 44th 250, my Legion level was now fully saturated at 10.6k. At this point, I could already taste victory, being only 5 classes away from completing my Pokédex. As the Night Troop event arrived in October, I started pushing this last stretch with Hoyoung, Lara, and Zero, working on my 47th 250 by the end of the month. And finally, during the Dark Ride update in November, I pushed my last 2 250s with Blaze Wizard and Nightwalker, concluding this 2+ years journey that started with the Shadower all the way back in September of 2022, marking my biggest achievement in this game by far. During this last stretch, a new idea had begun to take shape, with arcane dailies being quicker than ever before, and every class being 250 and enjoying the maximum reduction in kill count. Maxing arcane symbols became the obvious next goal, and so I began work on setting up the new Maple Planner for every character, streamlining the process of running through them every day as quickly as possible. A tedious process that would take over 6 hours per day for over 100 days. The addition of the Maple Planner was truly a godsend for this project. And this brings us to the present day. At the time of writing this video, I'm just a few days shy of completing this milestone, one that I will likely save for the day that this video goes live. Clicking all the symbols to level 20 will delete around 90 bill masses, as most of them started around level 10. But don't fret about it, as I already have close to 130 bill saved up from capping crystals. I'm very excited to see the raid power and damage gains from this. I'm not expecting anything crazy raid power wise, but it should be a 25 to 35% final damage gain on all my characters. And now, let us celebrate the past and open a new chapter into the future with this very special cinematic that I put together. It's self-ironic, it's very hilarious. I hope you enjoy.
MapleStory's grind guard. I'm on a mission, executing perfection with every map rotation, resisting the corruption. No frenzy totem needed. I conquer the game against all odds. I succeed. Strapped with my skills, I'm ready for the grind. From Kearney City to Hennessy's, I leave no map behind. Monsters fall like dominoes. I'm on fire. Can't you see? Efficiency's my motto. It's all about the XP. I'm a samurai in this MapleStory realm, slicing through mobs. My blade overwhelms. Lawless samurai, they know my name, gonna reach the top. It's my claim to fame.
I want to take a moment to thank anyone who's ever touched this journey. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching. This has been my biggest video yet, and I'm very proud of it. I'm trying to get more of a footing as a content creator as I refine my workflow, and I really hope to be able to continue producing content of this caliber as well as shorter form content. Make sure to like this video so I can reach as many people as possible, and have a good rest of your day.